The night had been long, and the bar was filled with the usual crowd, laughter, music, and the clink of glasses. Among the faces was Liam, a soldier who had just returned from his latest deployment. He sat at the bar, a little out of place in his military jacket, but it didn't matter. His best friend Jake sat beside him, sipping on a drink. The two of them had been through more than anyone could ever imagine, their bond forged through the toughest moments of their lives. Jake, a man with a kind heart, was no stranger to the darker side of life. The war had taken a toll on him, leaving scars that ran deeper than the ones on his skin. But tonight, it was supposed to be different. They were here to unwind, to forget for a while. As the night wore on, a group of loud, rowdy men entered the bar, taking up space and making the place feel even more crowded. One of them, a tall guy with a cocky attitude, started making fun of Jake's appearance. He had noticed Jake's disheveled hair and worn-out clothes, probably thinking he was an easy target. "Hey soldier," the man sneered. "Didn't know they let the homeless in here. Looks like you came straight from the streets." Liam's hand clenched around his drink. He could see Jake's face tighten, a familiar look that he had seen far too many times. It was a look that said Jake was fighting every urge to not react, to not let this ignorant fool get under his skin. But the insults kept coming. "You know," the man continued, "maybe they should send you back. You look like you're a liability." Liam stood up slowly, his muscles tense, not because he was angry, but because he knew how easily things could escalate. He'd seen it before too many times. But tonight was different. He wasn't going to let this go. "Hey, that's enough." Liam's voice was firm, steady, but the kind of calm that made it clear this wasn't a request. The man turned to face Liam, sizing him up. "What? You think you're going to stop me? Some soldier trying to be a hero?" Liam didn't back down, his eyes never leaving the man's. He knew how dangerous situations like this could get, but he wasn't about to let his friend be humiliated like this, not tonight. That's when the bouncers arrived, and what happened next would change everything. The bouncers were big, intimidating figures, but their approach seemed more casual, almost dismissive. They had seen their share of drunk fights and rowdy crowds, but they weren't prepared for what would happen next. One of the bouncers, a large man with a tattoo of a skull on his arm, walked up to Liam, his eyes scanning the situation. "Everything all right here?" he asked in a voice that was more of a statement than a question. The tall man who had been insulting Jake stepped forward, grinning. "Yeah, everything's fine, this guy just needs to mind his own business." He pointed toward Liam, his fingers shaking with the remnants of alcohol. Liam didn't flinch. "I'm asking you to stop, you've been insulting him long enough." The bouncer's eyes flickered between the two men, sizing up the situation. It was clear that he wasn't going to jump into the middle of a confrontation unless he had to. But the moment he looked at Jake, his body language tight, his face drawn in that familiar mask of silent pain, the bouncer hesitated. There was a shift in the atmosphere, a kind of quiet tension. The crowd around them had started to pay attention, sensing something wasn't right. A few whispers floated through the air. "Why don't you just go back to the bar and enjoy your drink?" The bouncer said, still not taking the situation seriously. "Let's avoid any trouble." Liam's jaw clenched. He could see the fear in Jake's eyes, the way he was retreating into himself, trying not to show that the words were cutting deeper than anyone could know. But that wasn't the worst of it. The tall man, emboldened by the bouncer's casual dismissal, stepped closer to Liam. "What are you gonna do about it, huh? You're just a soldier, no one cares about you." He leaned in, his voice low and venomous. "You're nothing." That's when everything changed. Liam's instincts kicked in before he could think, and with one swift motion, he shoved the man back. It wasn't an aggressive move, but more of a way to create space. The room fell silent. The bouncer's reaction was swift, but not what anyone expected. Instead of stepping in to calm the situation, he took a step back, crossing his arms over his chest. He said nothing. Liam stood his ground, looking around at the crowd that had suddenly gone quiet. The eyes of the entire room were on him now. He wasn't just standing up for Jake anymore. This was bigger than that, and the bouncers. They still hadn't moved. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The room felt like it had stopped breathing, everyone waiting for the next move. The bouncers stood there, arms crossed, their eyes flickering between Liam and the rowdy man. But they didn't act. Liam's heart was pounding in his chest, but his face remained calm. His gaze didn't leave the tall man who was now stumbling backward, slightly disoriented by the push, but still wearing that arrogant smirk. "You should have stayed out of it," the tall man growled, wiping his mouth as if he was about to lash out. "You think you're tough, huh? I'll show you how tough I am." Jake's hands were clenched into fists at his sides. He wasn't looking at the tall man anymore. His eyes were on the floor, his whole posture slumped in defeat. Liam's heart broke seeing Jake like that. No one should ever be made to feel so small, but just as the tall man took a step forward, ready to escalate the situation, the unexpected happened. A voice broke through the heavy silence, soft but firm. "Leave him alone." It wasn't Liam's voice. It wasn't even the bouncers' voices. It was a woman's voice. Everyone turned to see her standing near the entrance, her presence striking, her eyes sharp and unwavering. She was tall with a commanding presence that made her stand out. She wasn't dressed like the usual bar crowd, her clothes were simple but elegant, and there was something about her that exuded confidence. The tall man stopped in his tracks, his gaze shifting from the woman to Liam, then back again. For a moment it was as if he didn't know how to react. The bouncers, however, took notice. They looked at each other, then back at the woman, and for the first time all night there was a change in their stance. "Ma'am, this is a private matter," one of the bouncers said, his tone less confident than before. But the woman wasn't having it. "No," she said firmly, stepping forward into the space between Liam and the tall man. "This is not a private matter. You have a man here who has served his country, and you're allowing him to be humiliated for no reason. You've stood by and watched, and that's unacceptable." The room fell even quieter. The bouncers seemed unsure of what to do, the crowd now sensing the shift in the air. The tall man looked at the woman, confusion clouding his face. "You think you can just walk in here?" and he started, but the woman cut him off. "No," she said, her voice calm yet unyielding. "I think you should leave, now." The tension hung in the air like a storm about to break, and what happened next shocked everyone in the room, including Liam and Jake. The tall man looked at the woman, and for a brief moment there was hesitation in his eyes. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially by someone who wasn't afraid to stand up to him. His face reddened, and he stepped closer to her, trying to intimidate her with his size. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he sneered, his voice laced with venom. "You're just some." Before he could finish his sentence, the woman raised a hand, stopping him cold. There was a calmness to her demeanor that was almost unnerving. "Let me make this clear," she said, her voice sharp. "You're not going to get away with this. You're not going to walk in here and insult people who have given everything for their country. Not on my watch." The tall man's smirk faltered, and Liam noticed the shift. The man was used to throwing his weight around, but this time there was someone who wasn't backing down. For the first time that night, the bouncers looked uncomfortable. They shifted on their feet, unsure of how to proceed. They weren't used to a situation where they weren't the biggest authority in the room. The tall man, seeing his usual tactics weren't working, glared at the woman, then at Liam. His eyes narrowed, and without another word he turned and stormed toward the door, his friends reluctantly following him. But just before the door slammed shut behind them, he turned back, a final challenge in his voice. "This isn't over," he spat. "You'll regret this." The woman didn't flinch, she simply nodded, as if she had expected this. "I'll be waiting," she replied, her words cutting through the tension in the room, and then just like that, they were gone. The crowd in the bar, which had been holding its breath, finally exhaled. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the room. Everyone was still processing what had just happened. It wasn't just that the woman had stood up to the man, it was how she had done it, with grace, with authority, without ever raising her voice. Liam turned to Jake, who was now looking up at the woman. His eyes were wide, a mix of awe and confusion. "Who was that?" he whispered. Liam didn't know the answer, he'd never seen her before, but he felt something powerful radiating from her. It was like she wasn't just saving him and Jake, she was sending a message to everyone in that bar. The bouncers, still standing at the edge of the room, didn't move. The silence stretched on, but it was a different kind of silence now, a heavy contemplative one. And then, as if on cue, the woman turned to Liam and Jake, her expression softening slightly. "Are you both all right?" she asked, her tone now warmer, more personal. Jake nodded, still too stunned to speak, but Liam found his voice. Yeah, we're good. Thanks to you, he said, feeling a strange sense of gratitude toward her. She smiled, but there was something in her eyes, a depth, a history, that made Liam wonder if this was more than just a random act of kindness. She didn't say anything more. She simply gave a nod of acknowledgement and walked toward the door, disappearing into the night as quietly as she had arrived. For a moment no one in the bar spoke. It felt like time had frozen. Then slowly the conversation started again, but there was a new energy in the room, a sense of respect, of admiration, and as Liam looked at Jake, he couldn't help but feel that tonight had been more than just another night at the bar. It had been a reminder, one that they would never forget. Not quite yet. The room was still buzzing with the aftermath of what had just happened. It was like the events had left an invisible mark on everyone who had witnessed them. For a moment the noise of the bar seemed muffled, as if everyone was trying to process the strange and powerful moment they had just been a part of. Liam looked at Jake again. His friend still seemed in a daze, but there was something different in his eyes now, a flicker of hope, or maybe even a spark of something that hadn't been there before. Jake had been through so much, and tonight, for the first time in a long time, he had witnessed something that wasn't born of cruelty or judgment. Liam leaned closer, speaking quietly so only Jake could hear him. You good? Jake took a deep breath, glancing around the bar as if seeing it for the first time. He gave a small nod. Yeah, I think I am. The tension that had been clinging to Jake like a heavy weight seemed to lift, just a little. Liam felt a sense of relief wash over him. It wasn't just the confrontation with the tall man that had changed things. It was what had followed. The woman's presence had cut through the air like a blade, reminding them that sometimes, even in the darkest moments, there was light. But the night wasn't over. As they stood up to leave, the bouncers approached them, their demeanor entirely different now. No longer the intimidating figures they had been before, they seemed almost apologetic. We just wanted to say we're sorry, the same bouncer who had spoken earlier said. We should have stepped in sooner. You two don't deserve that. Liam gave him a nod, appreciating the acknowledgement. It's all right, thanks for doing the right thing. The bouncer looked at him, then to Jake, as if unsure whether to say more. After a long moment he simply added, take care of each other. Liam smiled, feeling the weight of the night finally starting to settle. We always do. As the two of them walked out of the bar, the cool night air hit them like a wave, refreshing and clean. They didn't speak at first, both of them just taking in the quiet that surrounded them. And as they made their way down the street, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that this night, this encounter with the woman, the confrontation, the strange way everything had unfolded, had set something in motion. He wasn't sure what it was yet, but he could feel it. Something had changed, not just for Jake, but for him too. The world might not always be kind, but sometimes there were moments when people stepped up, when they didn't turn away, and when kindness could still be a force to reckon with. And that, Liam thought, was the real victory. A few weeks had passed since that night at the bar, but the memory of it still lingered in the back of Liam's mind. Jake had seemed different ever since, quieter at times, but there was a certain peace about him that hadn't been there before. Maybe it was the woman's intervention, maybe it was the fact that someone had stood up for him in a way that nobody ever had before. Whatever it was, Jake was beginning to find some light in the darkness that had consumed him for so long. Liam, too, had been reflecting on the events. He had gone back to that night in his mind more times than he could count. It wasn't just the confrontation with the rude man that had stuck with him, or even the bouncer's unexpected hesitation, it was the woman. The way she had walked in with such confidence, the way she had handled the situation so effortlessly. Who was she? Liam couldn't help but wonder about her. She hadn't just been a passerby, someone who randomly stepped in and left. There was something in her eyes, a depth, a history, that made Liam believe she had her own story, one that might be just as complicated as their own. He found himself thinking about that night more often than he'd like to admit, wondering if he would ever see her again, if their paths would cross under different circumstances. Jake seemed to pick up on Liam's thoughts. One evening, while the two of them were sitting outside at a small cafe, sipping their drinks and watching the world go by, Jake broke the silence. "You ever think about that woman from the bar?" he asked, not looking at Liam but staring at the people passing by. Liam raised an eyebrow, surprised that Jake had brought it up. "Yeah, actually, I've been thinking about her a lot." Jake finally turned to face him, his expression thoughtful. "I don't know why, but there's something about her. The way she just took control. It was like she knew exactly what to do, like she wasn't afraid of anyone." Liam nodded, feeling the same pull toward her, a curiosity that he couldn't shake. "I know, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. It's like she was sent there for a reason." There was a pause between them, and Jake let out a heavy sigh. "I wonder what she saw in us, you know. I mean, she didn't have to step in, she didn't know us." Liam's mind started racing. What if she wasn't just some random woman? What if she had seen something in them, something that had made her decide to intervene? There had to be a reason she had been there that night, standing up for them, changing the course of the evening. "I don't know," Liam said, looking down at his drink, his thoughts drifting. "But part of me feels like we're not done with her. Like our paths are going to cross again. And when they do, I think it's going to mean something." Jake smiled faintly, a small glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Maybe, I don't know why, but I think you're right." As the days passed, both of them continued on with their lives. But the mysterious woman stayed with them. They couldn't shake the feeling that their encounter with her wasn't just some random event, it felt like a turning point. And then, one day, while Liam was walking down the street, he caught sight of her again. She was standing across the street, in front of a small bookstore, talking to someone. Liam's heart skipped a beat. Was this fate? Was this the moment he had been waiting for? He hesitated for only a second before crossing the street. As he got closer, she looked up and saw him. Recognition flickered in her eyes, and she smiled, just the smallest curve of her lips, but enough to stop him in his tracks. "Well," she said, her voice warm but still carrying that quiet strength. "Fancy seeing you again." Liam couldn't help but smile back. "It's been a while." She glanced behind her, at the person she had been talking to, a man in a suit who had been listening intently to their conversation. He seemed to recognize Liam, nodding politely, before excusing himself and walking away. With the street now quieter, the woman turned back to Liam. "I guess we weren't quite done, were we?" Liam shook his head, feeling that strange sense of destiny pull him closer to her. "No, I don't think we are." And just like that, it seemed like everything had come full circle. The mysterious woman was no longer a stranger. She was someone they were meant to meet again, and this time, Liam wasn't going to let the opportunity slip away. Wow, what an incredible journey we've been on together. From the intense bar confrontation to the mysterious woman who changed everything for Liam and Jake, this story has been full of unexpected twists, heartfelt moments, and the kind of real human connection that makes us all stop and think. It just goes to show that sometimes, the right person stepping in at the right moment can make all the difference. If you enjoyed this story and felt the emotions, twists, and suspense, be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on any more gripping tales. Like this video if it resonated with you, and share it with your friends to spread the word. We'd love to hear what you think, so leave a comment and let us know your thoughts. What do you think happens next for Liam, Jake, and the mysterious woman? Your support means the world, and it helps us keep bringing you more amazing stories. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more.